Somewhere, right now, a monkey is eating fermented fruit off the jungle floor and stumbling into a tree. Congratulations! You've just watched the invention of the world's oldest hobby. Humans didn't invent drinking. We just watched a drunk monkey, took notes, and said, "Hold my mead." But here's the part that makes this story even stranger. That monkey might not be a coincidence. Over the next 20+ minutes, you're going to learn how our attraction to alcohol may go back millions of years before humans even existed, and how our species spent the time since perfecting the art of poisoning ourselves on purpose and somehow calling it civilization. If you've ever wondered why your ancestors thought, "Let's drink the swamp water, but first let's forget it in a jar for 6 months," was a good idea, stick around. Subscribe now, because by the end of this video you'll never look at a wine glass the same way again. Here's a fact that sounds made up but isn't. Our attraction to alcohol may predate humans entirely. Long before anyone built a brewery, planted a vineyard, or invented the cocktail shaker, our primate ancestors were already eating fruit. And ripe fruit has a dirty little secret. Once it starts to rot, wild yeast converts its sugars into ethanol. Alcohol. Not much. Nowhere near what's in a bottle of vodka, but enough to change the smell. There's a real scientific hypothesis for this, proposed by biologist Robert Dudley, called the Drunken Monkey Hypothesis. The idea is that our ancient primate ancestors evolved to associate the smell of alcohol with something valuable, ripe, calorie-dense fruit. In other words, the smell of alcohol may have been nature's version of a dinner bell. Picture it. You're a prehistoric primate. No pizza delivery, no fridge, no GPS. Your entire survival strategy is find food before something with bigger teeth finds you. Then, somewhere in the jungle, a strange smell drifts by. Fermented fruit. You follow it. You eat it. Congratulations, you've just discovered the world's first happy hour. Before you picture ancient monkeys stumbling through a drunken karaoke contest, an important caveat: naturally fermented fruit has a relatively low alcohol content, and researchers don't think our ancestors were routinely getting blackout drunk in the canopy. The theory is subtler than that. Primates that were good at sniffing out nutritious, ripe fruit may have simply benefited from being drawn to the chemical signal attached to it. The calories were the goal. The alcohol was just the accidental side effect riding along for the evolutionary ticket, which creates a genuinely strange possibility. Our modern attraction to alcohol might be a leftover survival instinct, wired for a completely different world, one where finding a bit of fermented fruit meant finding real energy. The drunken monkey didn't invent civilization, but the attraction that got it stumbling into that tree might be one small evolutionary puzzle piece sitting underneath everything else in this video. And then, around 12,000 years ago, humans figured out something far more powerful than a rotten piece of fruit: how to make the yeast do the work for us, on command. That's where the human part of the story actually begins. Let's get one thing straight. Nobody invented alcohol. Alcohol invented itself, and humans just showed up late to take credit, which is honestly on brand for our entire species. Around 10,000 BCE, somewhere in the Fertile Crescent, a pile of wild grain got rained on, sat in a warm pot, and started fizzing. A hungry farmer looked at this bubbling, sour-smelling mess and thought, not "that's spoiled," but "that's dinner." Wild yeast had landed on the grain, eaten the sugars, and produced alcohol and carbon dioxide as waste. The very first beer in human history was, biologically speaking, yeast urine. We've been chasing that feeling for 12,000 years since. But here's where historians actually start arguing, and it's a great argument. The traditional story says agriculture came first, and beer was just a happy byproduct of farming grain. Some researchers think it might be backwards. Evidence from sites in the ancient Near East, including the massive stone complex at Göbekli Tepe, has fueled real debate about whether communal feasting and brewing played a role in pushing hunter-gatherers towards settled, agricultural life in the first place, not the other way around. We can't prove beer built civilization, but the possibility that some of the world's first permanent settlements were partly motivated by the desire to throw one enormous prehistoric party is almost too perfect to leave out. Archaeologists also found pottery residue in modern-day China dating back to 7000 BCE, a mix of rice, honey, and fruit, fermented into something that was basically a hangover with extra steps. Meanwhile, in the Caucasus, grapes were doing their own thing, turning into the earliest known wine around 6000 BCE. And here's the part that should terrify you. None of these people had any idea what yeast actually was. No microscopes, no germ theory, just vibes and an alarmingly high tolerance for risk. In ancient Sumer, beer wasn't a treat. It was a food group. Workers building temples and ziggurats were paid in beer rations, sometimes several liters a day. Which explains a lot about ancient architecture, honestly. You ever wonder why some of those pyramids look slightly crooked? Now you know. The Sumerians even had a beer goddess, Ninkasi, and a hymn to her that doubles as the oldest known beer recipe. Humanity's first act of putting knowledge into writing, and we used it to make sure nobody forgot the beer recipe. Beer was also safer to drink than water in most ancient cities, since the brewing process killed off waterborne bacteria. For thousands of years, getting a mild buzz wasn't a lifestyle choice. It was basic hygiene. Somewhere, your doctor just felt a disturbance in the force. Egyptians took it further. Workers building the pyramids were given beer as part of their wages. Historians estimate close to 5 liters a day for some laborers. 5 liters. That's not a wage, that's an intervention waiting to happen. Move over to the Mediterranean, and the Greeks decided beer was for peasants and wine was for people with taste, which is a very Greek thing to say about literally everything. The Greeks worshipped Dionysus, the god of wine, madness, and what modern doctors would call extremely poor decision-making. Wine wasn't just a drink to them, it was a religious experience, with entire festivals built around getting collectively, ceremonially wasted in the name of spiritual enlightenment. Somehow this is the same civilization that gave us democracy and geometry. But here's the twist. Greeks almost never drank wine straight. They considered drinking it undiluted to be barbaric, literally something only non-Greeks did. They'd cut wine with water, sometimes 2 or 3 parts water to 1 part wine, and drink it at symposiums, fancy structured drinking parties with music, poetry, and philosophical debate. So picture this. The birthplace of Western philosophy was, functionally, a very pretentious frat party where everyone had opinions about ethics and terrible breath. The Romans, naturally, took the Greek idea and turned the dial up. Wine became a full-blown status symbol. The wealthy aged theirs for decades. The poor drank a cheap, vinegary version called Posca that soldiers were rationed daily. Rome ran on wine the way modern offices run on coffee, except the Roman version occasionally ended in a Senate stabbing. Fast forward past the fall of Rome into the so-called Dark Ages, and you'd expect drinking culture to collapse along with everything else. Instead, it went corporate. Well, monastic. Medieval monasteries became Europe's brewing headquarters. Monks needed something to drink during fasting periods when food was restricted, and beer, rich in calories and nutrients, was ruled acceptable, famously summarized by the phrase, liquid bread. Somewhere, a monk figured out that if you call it a food technically, you can drink it guilt-free during Lent. Genius. Absolutely shameless, but genius. Monasteries didn't just brew for themselves. They ran some of the first documented breweries as businesses, refining recipes and controlling quality centuries before anyone thought to trademark a beer label. Meanwhile, mead, fermented honey and water, was still a staple further north, tied up in Norse and Anglo-Saxon culture. Vikings believed mead granted wisdom and poetic inspiration, courtesy of a myth involving a slain god's blood being turned into magic honey wine. Beautiful mythology, or the greatest marketing pitch ever written for spiked honey water? Possibly both. Everything up to this point was fermentation, sugar and yeast doing their thing, capped at around 15% alcohol before the yeast literally poisons itself to death in its own waste. Fitting. Distillation changes the equation entirely, and its real history is messier and more interesting than one clean eureka moment. Rather than a single invention at a single point in time, distillation techniques developed gradually, with scholars across the medieval Islamic world making significant documented contributions to refining and recording the process, building on earlier knowledge that stretched back even further. What emerged from that centuries-long development was spirit, because early practitioners genuinely believed they'd extracted the soul of the wine. They were half right. They'd extracted something that would go on to ruin several human souls, just not the way they meant. Early distilled alcohol wasn't a party drink. It was medicine, literally called aqua vitae, water of life, prescribed for everything from plague prevention to grief. Nothing says state-of-the-art 14th century healthcare like handing a grieving widow a shot of 120 proof mystery liquid and calling it treatment. By the time whiskey, brandy, and gin show up in the historical record, distillation had gone from medicinal curiosity to full production industry. Gin got so cheap and so strong in 18th century London that the government had to step in. The gin craze saw consumption reach levels historians describe as a public health crisis. Humanity had finally built a machine that turned grain into pure, distilled bad decisions, and mass-produced it. Alcohol didn't just follow trade routes, it built them. Sugar plantations in the Caribbean produced molasses as a byproduct, and someone figured out you could ferment and distill that into rum. What followed was one of history's ugliest economic triangles: rum, sugar, and enslaved labor, tangled together in the transatlantic trade for centuries. Rum became currency. Sailors were rationed it daily well into the 20th century. The British Royal Navy didn't officially end its daily rum ration until 1970. There were sailors operating actual warships, on the clock, legally entitled to booze, within living memory. Somewhere, an HR department is having a stroke. Meanwhile, in colonial America, whiskey became so central to the economy that the U.S. government's attempt to tax it in 1791 sparked an actual armed uprising, the Whiskey Rebellion. Americans will tolerate a lot of things from their government. Taxing their liquor was not one of them. By the early 20th century, a very confident group of people in the United States decided the solution to alcohol's problems was simply banning it entirely. What could go wrong? Everything. Everything went wrong. Prohibition, from 1920 to 1933, didn't stop people from drinking. It just handed the entire alcohol industry over to organized crime. Al Capone allegedly made over $60 million a year off illegal alcohol at the height of Prohibition, roughly $1 billion today, made entirely because lawmakers thought willpower was a substitute for policy. People also started drinking things they absolutely should not have. Industrial alcohol, deliberately poisoned by the government to discourage bootleggers from repurposing it, still got stolen and redistilled anyway. And thousands of Americans died from drinking poisoned liquor during Prohibition, a fact the government fully knew and allowed to continue. Banning alcohol didn't stop drinking. It just added a small chance of death to every sip. Bold public health strategy. Once Prohibition collapsed under its own hypocrisy, alcohol production entered the industrial age for real. Mass-produced lagers, standardized recipes, refrigeration, and precise chemical control turned brewing and distilling from folk tradition into exact science. Today we can sequence the exact strain of yeast in a bottle of beer. We know precisely which molecules cause a hangover. We understand fermentation on a cellular level. And with all of that knowledge, we mostly use it to make seltzer taste like a mango. The craft beer boom, natural wine movement, and small batch distilling of the last few decades are, ironically, a return to the same unpredictable small-scale process that started this whole thing in a rain-soaked grain pile 12,000 years ago. We spent 12 millennia perfecting the science of fermentation, just to circle back and pay extra for it to be artisanal again. So here's the uncomfortable part. After 12,000 years, we've learned almost everything there is to know about how alcohol actually works. We know how yeast makes it. We know how the liver breaks it down. We know how it affects the brain. We know the risks. And yet the story hasn't really changed. Humans still gather around a table. Someone pours a drink. Everyone laughs. And for a few hours, we pretend the consequences belong to tomorrow. The bottles changed. The empires changed. The technology changed more times than we can count. But the human reason for reaching for it in the first place? That might be older than our own species. Somewhere out there, that original drunk monkey is still eating fermented fruit off a jungle floor, completely unaware that it accidentally kick-started the entire evolutionary chain leading to this very sentence. If this kind of humanity is somehow both brilliant and an absolute mess, content is your thing, you know what to do. Hit subscribe, because next time we're covering something equally chaotic.